Welcome to part 2 of my Arrow video collection. So picking up where we left off, then we have one of Arrow's more recent releases. This is a film that I'd always wanted to see but just never got around to. I watched it recently and absolutely adored every frame of this movie, and that is Bound, a film about two lesbian lovers who decide to steal money from the mob. And needless to say, things go awry. This was the first film by the Wachowski siblings before they made The Matrix, and apparently when they approached Warner Brothers for funding for The Matrix, because they hadn't made a film before, Warner Brothers were reluctant to greenlight it and said, you know, we want a film under your belt before we will fund The Matrix. So they went away and made Bound, which, looking at it, you would never think that it was made almost solely to greenlight another film, because they pour so much love, care and attention into this that it's one of the best directional debuts I've seen in a long time. The style is just bursting from every frame, the kinetic camera work, but it never feels self-indulgent, it never feels like the showing off. Every stylistic tick in this movie feels organic to the story and the characters that we're following. I love sort of, you know, stealing money gone awry movies, like, you know, the Coen brothers do this really well. They did Fargo and No Country for Old Men. It's a subgenre that's very interesting. It allows filmmakers to really experiment with style, and that's what the Wachowskis did with this. It's also got a load of really interesting special features, which I've waded through most of them. It's interesting to hear from, you know, like the director of photography and the editor. Many people involved in the movie are interviewed for this. The Wachowskis are notably absent, but then they don't really do special features, you know, they don't really show up, they're very secretive. You do get some on-set glimpses, however, and it's all very interesting stuff. But Bound, I would very much recommend. It's also nice to see another female-led thriller. It's a great movie. Honestly, I can't recommend it enough. Bound was such a pleasant surprise for me. I absolutely loved it. We then have one of my favourite Joe Dante movies. This is the Steelbook version of The Burbs, starring Tom Hanks. Now, this is a film that is... There's the back there, is a car trunk full of skulls. This is a film that I find very relatable in a sense, not because I live next door to psychopaths or anything like that, but it basically follows Tom Hanks' character who just wants to have a staycation for a week. You know, he just wants to stay at home and not do anything. While he's staying at home, however, he notices that his next door neighbours, the Klopeks, are potentially up to no good and suspects them of being murderers. Needless to say, wackiness ensues. It also stars like Carrie Fisher, Bruce Dern and Corey Feldman, you know, some great, fantastic actors who were working quite a lot in the 80s, which is when this was released. I believe it was 88 according to this. The Burbs is a film I sort of grew up on. I adore it. It's a very nice transfer, you know, Arrow have restored it as well. And it also features an alternate cut of the movie, which was just put together from, I believe, videotapes found in Joe Dante's personal library. It's a great set for a great movie. If you haven't seen The Burbs, definitely check that out. We then have Lucio Fulci's City of the Living Dead. As I mentioned earlier, you know, I'm a fan of Lucio Fulci, although this film I found to be a little bit overrated. Apart from the gore, which is very well done, as it always is with Lucio Fulci, I found the story to not really be up to much. It's essentially one of the many George A. Romero rip-offs that came out around that time. It's definitely worth watching. Arrow have given it the 5-star treatment. It's not one of my favourite Fulci movies, but it's definitely worth checking out. So that's City of the Living Dead. We then have, I think, one of my partner, Laura's, one of her only Arrow movies, and that is Class of Nuke High. It's a trauma movie, it's a film she loves. I haven't actually seen it yet, so I can't really talk about it too much. The next film is Dawn of the Dead, which we will have a little bit more of an in-depth look at. George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead was actually Arrow's first release, I believe, and it's a set that I picked up while I was on my lunch break. I walked to HMV and I saw it. Dawn of the Dead has always been one of my favourite movies. I had no idea that this set even existed. I've had it for years since it was first released, and it apparently now goes for pretty big money on eBay. It features reversible art, as you can see there. Actually comes with 3 discs. You also get a booklet and a poster which is shown on the back in all its glory. Dawn of the Dead is such a gorgeous set. Next we have George A. Romero's Day of the Dead. They did release this as a steelbook, but I quite like the normal slipcover edition. It also comes with a comic book, as you can see there, and a free poster, which you can see on the back, again loaded with special features. Day of the Dead, quite possibly my favourite Romero movie, possibly my favourite zombie movie ever. I'm a huge zombie movie fan. I absolutely love zombie movies. Grew up on them. I remember having sleepovers when I was far too young to watch them. Day of the Dead was the one that I watched and potentially scarred me for life. I felt like I was watching something really taboo when I was a kid. It's a fantastic movie. The sequel to Dawn, it follows survivors held up in a military bunker. And as with all of Romero's zombie movies, things go awry. It expanded on the zombie mythology that he established in Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead in a great way. You know, people criticised Day because it became a lot more claustrophobic and a much smaller film than Dawn, the prior film, which many consider to be his masterpiece. However, Day of the Dead, I just feel is sort of criminally underrated. I love it. It's one of my favourites. Next we have Wes Craven's Deadly Blessing, which is a film I picked up in CEX for $3.99, knowing nothing about it. I'm a fan of Wes Craven, I watched it. It's a horror film essentially set in the Amish community, and it, for the most part, is a normal thriller, and then has one of the weirdest final scenes that I think I've ever seen in any film ever, which suggests that the whole thing could have a supernatural edge to it. It's a really weird, odd film. It's not one of Wes Craven's strongest movies by any stretch of the imagination. You know, this is the guy who did Scream and A Nightmare on Elm Street. But Deadly Blessing, it's an interesting watch. It's a curio, and it's doing the rounds for really cheap, so I would recommend picking it up. Next we have, as I mentioned earlier, one of my favourite Dario Argento movies, and that's Deep Red. A film which is a sort of a kind of a murder mystery edge to it, and a film that actually features one of the biggest spoilers I've ever seen, but it's apparently the film's use of mise-en-scène really hides the identity of the killer, who you actually see towards the beginning of the movie, but don't notice necessarily until the end. So it's a film that's definitely worth checking out. They're actually going to be bringing out a new, I believe, 4K restoration of Deep Red. That's on the horizon, which I may have to pick up at some point in the future, but in the meantime I'm quite satisfied with this edition, loaded with special features, comes with a poster, as with all of Arrow's releases, also has reversible sleeve art, as you can see there. A great little movie, worth picking up. Then we have the Steelbook edition of Demons and Demons 2. This actually features both of Lamberto Bava's movies, the original Demons and its sequel, sort of an Evil Dead rip-off. However, Demons, the first one, which is set in a cinema and the film kind of comes to life, demons run amok, wackiness ensues. That film I absolutely loved, precisely because of the number of Evil Dead references that it featured. The sequel, however, where they run amok in an apartment block, I didn't think was as strong. The first one is definitely the best. This set is gorgeous, however. It's a lovely steelbook, and again is loaded with special features. Arrow really go the whole hog with these releases. Demons is one of probably the first Demons movie, however, is probably one of the strongest movies that Arrow's released. I really, really enjoy it, so that's that. Then we have what is possibly my favourite Brian De Palma movie ever, and that's Dressed to Kill. This is a psychosexual thriller which is very much in the vein of Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. It stars Michael Caine, Angie Dickinson, Nancy Allen. Nancy Allen, of course, is in loads of Brian De Palma's movies. It's basically a kind of, I don't want to go into like the plot if you don't know it, but it's a bit of a murder mystery, a thriller. It's got a great cover there. As I've said, there is so much of Brian De Palma's style with this. This oozes his style, you know, the use of soft focus and slow motion and the sort of gratuitous nudity shots and borderline gratuitous violence. It's a fantastic movie, definitely worth picking up. I will champion this movie all the way. I love it, it's one of his strongest, and it's a lovely release from Arrow. And that is the end of part 2.